We all thought it would stop with Christian Horner gone, but no. It's arguably gotten even worse, and it's Helmut Marko. So Toto, you wanted a new sparring partner? Well, the Austrian just clocked in. You know Toto's having a rough time when even Helmut Marko says George Russell is the ideal Mercedes leader, not Max Verstappen, and in truth, he's not wrong. In a piece with German media, the Red Bull special advisor weighed in on the situation regarding the contract discussions with the current Mercedes team leader, and he very much used it as an opportunity to call out Mercedes and take away the attention and the fire which is going on regarding Red Bull Racing's second driver at the moment. This is absolute gold. Red Bull's on a tear here. The Austrian's going, the Jaws discussion agreement. Isn't that weird? Oh, Toto, you're absolutely silly there. But, okay, here is what the Austrian actually said, for your consideration. They're certainly not waiting for Max, and I don't really know anyone else who could be considered as team leader. I think these are negotiations about salary, after Russell was kept waiting for such a long time. Perhaps this hesitation is his revenge for not having made an official decision yet. Now, based on my early interactions and responses with George Russell fans, even they are really painfully having to admit that Dr. Marko actually has a point here. That is saying something. Look, at this point, just give George the contract that he wants, Toto. I know you keep saying that, yes, don't worry, the contract is done in principle. No, I don't want in principle. I want it in writing. Because it's very clear here that what we saw from Russell in the midst of the feud he had with Verstappen last year around Qatar, this lad is not one to be bullied around, even if it's with his boss. Marko has a point, the sticking point we've seen time and time again cropping up from what little gossip we do have from talks with Mercedes and Russell. Money seems to be the issue, and the idea about what George Russell thinks that he is worth. It's clear that it probably has been inflated since just 6 months ago when Toto Wolff said that he was super happy with both he and Antonelli as their lineup for the next couple of years. We all thought, hey, cool, done and dusted. He's not tempted by Max. Couple of months later, oh no, he is tempted by Max. Okay. And it really does seem like this is something that is all the talk of the paddock. This is something I think everyone within the know is really discussing and nattering about. So Helmut Marko has just taken this as an opportunity to taunt Mercedes for once, giving them a taste of their own medicine, to maybe give off the impression that Mercedes, they can give it, but they can't take. All Marko is saying is actually something quite innocuous. She's just saying, well, if Max Verstappen's not on the market, the only logical decision left to make is just give George. He's the perfect team leader. He's not saying anything mean, he's just saying something actually quite flattering to George. But he is also making it very clear that right now Max Verstappen is not for sale, and if things go really well, he may not be for the next couple of years, and maybe by the time he does consider his options, he may even move out of Formula One. Or if Zak Brown got his way, he might end up with McLaren in their hypercar division. That would be very interesting. But then you got to remember, Ford's doing its own thing, and they would ideally like to have him do stuff with World Endurance and Le Mans, etc. So Max is very much being pulled apart from different directions, not just in Formula One. And oh yeah, Marko's saying to Toto, just stop fantasizing about my boy, okay? It certainly makes sense that ever since Christian Horner's dismissal, Red Bull has been really doing their best to generate positive news stories, or to make them look good and Mercedes look bad, and basically giving Verstappen every reason to stay, including Marko essentially granting Max permission to compete at the dream event of his next year, the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. No, not just permission, but downright pride, saying it would be a fantastic opportunity to show how open and considerate we are, in allowing Max to pursue his dreams after him really spectacularly and impressively getting his permit. And you can also see in the background all of this Zak Brown milking this for all that it's worth. Did you hear all the stuff about Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris and Le Mans? That in 2027, Zak Brown, allow those two to actually partake in that competition? Oh, that is so jumping on the bandwagon, Zak. I thought you didn't want to be a copy of Red Bull. What you're doing is copying what Red Bull is doing, so, what's it gonna do, Zak? Also, Max himself has since framed staying at Red Bull for next year and beyond, it being a simple decision, not a reluctant one that he had no choice but to make. So that removes the romantic rescue narrative that kept Mercedes options open earlier in the year. Heck, as I said in my video yesterday, Ferrari looks like more of a compelling and straightforward option for Verstappen than Mercedes. Because if you want to boil that video down, if you don't want to go and watch it, which I really strongly suggest you do, because Max has really made it quite simple for Ferrari if they want to have his services for the end of the decade and beyond. if you can produce a car that can win, and I'm the final piece in the puzzle, then I'm more than happy to work with you. And with Mercedes, I can easily imagine things being a little bit more complicated in regards to negotiations, because look what's going on with negotiations with a Mercedes junior driver through and through. Someone who is within the system. Max Verstappen has got nothing to do with the system. The contract talks with that could easily be even more complex and awkward and complicated. Those talks would probably be an absolute nightmare even. So with that door shut, dragging Russell's deal out even more than it has to be is just making the matter even worse. And beyond all of that, there is also a psychological bit of warfare going on here. Mercedes lost Hamilton, their spiritual anchor, and Russell knows it, having worked with him for 3 seasons. The longer he waits, the more Mercedes sweat, because uncertainty regarding a team leader after having lost Lewis, that would destabilise morale even more. So turn the Lewis screw a little bit. And not only that, but Marko floating a negotiation story like this, it's uncomfortable for Mercedes, but it's believable. Russell has been kept waiting while the team explored Verstappen, so now he'll use this time as leverage to get what he feels he deserves. And all of this is stuff that we do have receipts for. George Russell himself blurted out to the media, I don't think intentionally, that talks had indeed been going on in the background between Mercedes, Toto and Verstappen, having the green lights been given from the Stuttgart base. These were talks that happened where a couple of months previously they had not even been contemplated. And I don't care how much fortitude George Russell has, surely if he found out, he would have been absolutely kicked in the teeth. And Toto did go on to admit that sometimes you just need to have these kind of talks. He's just doing due diligence, that he's just doing what every team principal should be doing. If a 4-time world champion becomes available, you talk to him. Yeah, that's all very well and good, Toto, but when you also commit to your 2 current drivers and say that you're super happy with them, it means that either you are lying about that and you are not super happy, which could be evident as he now says that Kimi Antonelli is underwhelming after what happened at Monza. He said in that statement, underwhelming 4 times. But yeah, he did admit that he had been talking to Max. There's also another edge to what Marko said, which some people may miss. The whole thing about I don't know anyone else who could be an easy leader other than Russell, that is more than just giving George Russell the level of praise as somebody who's been in the Formula 1 game for a long time now. It is a reminder to us all, especially with George being the best of the rest this year, how can you do better than George Russell at the moment? No one else better than him is available, and that is a very, very small pool at the best of times. So why would you go and upset him like this or give him the means to ask for more money? Because that's exactly what's happened. George has gone, blimey, I'm being compared to Max Verstappen. Well, surely I must have some skills and elements similar to him. I'm guessing I probably am worth more. And since Max has around $75 million a year, I think I should be worth something similar. And everyone else who is actually part of the elite of Formula 1 is already tied down for the next couple of years. So the cleanest thing for Mercedes to do is just lock in their guy who is part of the elite. But you got to admit, the entire Mercedes side of the situation, it's just been so clear-cut. Again, in April, he was super happy with George and Kimi. By the time we get to June, July, he then admits, oh, there have been talks with Max Verstappen, as then reiterated by George. Then we get to the Dutch Grand Prix after the summer break, and Toto then goes back to saying that George and Kimi is the plan for 2026, and the agreement is done in principle, and there are just some things to be ironed out. But wait. There's been the summer break. There was an entire month where there wasn't really much to do and you still couldn't thrash something out. And taken together, this arc supports Marko's point. The Verstappen flirtation was explored, then parked, while the team converged on continuity, with Russell as the senior voice. But now we're getting further and further away from Mercedes' usual lockdown date of late August, and the European leg of the season is over and done with. So if you want a sober reason Mercedes can sell to fans and sponsors for all of these delays, just look at the performance and context rather than simple romance. Just look to what George Russell was able to do, where he is in the championship. He's in 4th place right now, competing with Max Verstappen, one of the best drivers on the grid, for 3rd place, behind the 2 McLarens who are, quite frankly, just dominating. There is no way you can easily eclipse the 2 of them now. And I think sponsors and fans are very much aware of this and are understanding of that, at least for this year. And the best performance marker is the Canadian Grand Prix. George Russell got pole, he won the race, Kimi Antonelli was there in 3rd, having a fantastic race of his own, a Mercedes double podium, all in the midst of McLaren dominance. That's not too shabby. So in the midst of McLaren absolutely pummeling everyone into the dust, you want to have somebody who is stable, reliable, dependable, loyal to a fault sometimes, and this is going into a complete rules reset. You need somebody who is going to be composed and confident. George is very much like that. He is not somebody who's going to be bossed around. He is not a pushover. You need a lead driver who is not a pushover, even if it does rub people up the wrong way sometimes. And yet still there is not a deal done, and every single delay is going to make Mercedes look indecisive, dithering, that they have no clue what they're doing. All of the sponsors that Mercedes have, they're surely looking at this and going like, just get it done, mate. And there are other things to take out of this which are perfectly valid to discuss here. By framing the hold-up as salary negotiations and by praising Russell as the only viable option, Marko's telling George and his managers that patience is profitable, that they shouldn't give up, stick it out to get what you want. Mercedes can't afford to lose you, so don't give in. Even if Wolff insists money is not the key factor, public framing like this nudges the price up, or the term, or both. Red Bull are making Mercedes out to be a bunch of dithering no-hopers who can't make a decision which on paper looks like the easiest decision to make. George Russell has had a fantastic season. Why would you get rid of him, or why would you just not look to secure his services already? Especially since Max Verstappen is not available. And especially since Carlos Sainz, who was available, was very much told, no, we are committed to Kimi Antonelli, and George Russell already had a contract for 2025. And arguably, Carlos Sainz could have easily been a good play, and he was looking toward Mercedes, but then ultimately plumped for Williams. And with Christian Horner nowhere near any of these matters anymore, Red Bull are actually starting to look quite competent again, and so quickly after Horner's dismissal, it's wild. And Mercedes' unusual governance really adds some meat to these talks. Wolff reminded TV that Mercedes manages Russell as one of his juniors. That blurs the line between employer and manager. It gives Mercedes also deep trust equity with the driver, but in a negotiation, it can also complicate who is we and who is me. Who is really steering the ship here? And Marko's revenge chestnut? Oh, that's poking it perfectly. Especially with the previous notions Wolff had mentioned that drivers who ask for multi-year deals don't have the right mindset. It very much indicates to me that this entire mess is not, as he keeps on putting it, a formality. 2026 is going to be a very crucial year, and George already has a sense that Mercedes has got something under the tank which is looking really, really promising, something that he really likes. George keeps saying that the odds of him actually leaving the team are exceptionally low. He would ideally like to stay at Mercedes, but at the same time, he feels like he is actually worth more than what Mercedes might be putting on the table at the moment. He wants Mercedes support, and he is justifiably right to ask for that support, but you just sense that, yeah, Mercedes are happy with George, but in the sense of him being a team leader, it's been a very rocky road this year. They are still not willing to listen to every word he says. Tyre calls being forgotten or straight up ignored. That is not something that should happen with a leader of a team. That would never happen with Max Verstappen, or if it does, oh, Verstappen will not stop going on about it. You'll never hear the last of it if you go against one of his requests. And again, with the whole Carlos Sainz thing, after him finding out that Kimi Antonelli was going to be the one that was going to be committed, a rookie, you stick to that and you make the other seat more predictable. And that's where Russell's importance skyrockets here. Kimi will need mentorship and a steady reference point, not a teammate distracted by his own contract drama. And if Mercedes delay too long, they risk undermining both of them. And if Max is staying put and the other A-list leaders are tied up, the least risky option is just to keep George. And to top it all off, Marko is really blunt here for a very specific reason. Red Bull wants to slam shut any talk with Verstappen going to Mercedes. Any talk. Forever. Done. Dusted. Not going to happen. Toto, you missed out on Max the first time around. You most likely missed him the second time around. So do not keep thinking, oh, third time might be the charm. Just stop. To make it very clear, as Max's closest confidant within the garage, the Dutchman is committed to them, and the process of rebuilding after the rocky last 18 months is well and truly in motion. The team and Laura Mekis, they're doing their damnedest to assure their main man that they'll be thinking about the car all the time, instead of the best way to spin things to the media. Max doesn't give a hoot about the media or public perception, so give a hoot about the car, which is exactly what he is doing. And wouldn't you look at that? When you give a hoot about the car, and it therefore gives results, you actually spin the team toward positive headlines anyway. It's almost like, hey, make the car go faster, you win a race, people clap and go, good on you, Red Bull. It's such a simple plan. I don't think you need me to tell you, it's all been gravy for Red Bull ever since the summer break finished. Sure, there is the talk about the second driver, but that is paling in comparison to Max Verstappen being happy, and Nürburgring, and permits, and freedom. So Marko, what he's doing right here, it's needling Mercedes at no extra cost, and no one can really dispute it. They're just going, well, yeah, he's not wrong, actually. Even those who absolutely despise Helmut agree with him, and that must be really galling if you especially do not like him. And you know what? I feel like this is Red Bull getting revenge after what happened back in Canada, when Toto was poking the bear around Christian regarding protests behind the safety car. For Toto, there was no cost in doing that, and it was probably part of the charm offensive with Max Verstappen. Yeah, it got that petty, talking about, oh, just look at the team personnel, they missed their flights home, and it was all Christian's fault. Oh, Max Verstappen, oh, our team is a lot more due diligent, we do not make petty protests like this, oh dear. And Marko's just like, ah, well, you see, Toto too can play at that game. So yeah, he is doing the same thing to Mercedes in the middle of these high-stakes negotiations with Russell, which really should not be high-stakes negotiations. It should be one of the easiest decisions that Mercedes ever had to make. Just give George another 1+1 deal like you did the previous time. You could also frame it as maybe Marko throwing Toto a bit of a bone here and just making the options easier for him. Max is not there, keep George, simple as. But it's just resulted in things dragging unnecessarily, and it's going to affect Kimi as well. So ultimately, could you say that Toto flirting with Max was just a simple and honest mistake? Will Toto live to regret this and maybe not even have George Russell if another team comes in and swoops the Brit away? Which can happen. Aston Martin might do that if they smell blood and Fernando goes, hey, George, my mate, he's available, why don't you get him? And then Lance can have some reason to go, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. And then Lance has a reason to bow out. Well, perhaps. Wolff has defended the approach as due diligence, like I said. He called it an obligation to explore what a full-time world champ is going to do, and to go for the best driver when it's real. That is a standard team principle stance, and it does matter because it frames the Verstappen conversations as homework rather than him really dropping the ball. But did these flirtations backfire with Russell? Absolutely. It slowed things down and nudged the price upwards. You gotta hand it to George, he really knows how much he is worth, especially going into a brand new regulation cycle when you need the best of the best, especially if the car turns out to be a little bit so-so after all the expectations and all of the data beforehand. Again, none of this necessarily means he wants to leave Mercedes, he still believes in the cause, otherwise we wouldn't be having any discussions or talks whatsoever. There'd be no formalities, there'd be no talks and mentions about maybe them being around next year. No, George would have already started looking. We'd be hearing far more rumours from leakers that would be abound that George would be talking to other teams. George here is simply standing up for himself, and the tax, the burden that Toto is going to be having regarding this are optics and timing. And the optics, oh my gosh, I do think that this year was very, very important for Mercedes to really get right life after Lewis, to justify people being fans of Mercedes. This year, it's really not done that, especially with the fans that they've already got. You can hear it in Helmut Marko's jab. This hurts because it fits the public timeline. If you're a rival, you make this point loudly since it pushes Russell price even higher. If you're Mercedes, you've got to live with the PR sting right now because it doesn't change the on-track calculus. But in a season where you are still reeling from the loss of Hamilton fans, themselves reeling over what's happening at Ferrari, to lose even more public goodwill is not looking very smart. There is one possible upside to Wolff's homework though, and this could be an internal one. The only way that Toto can recover from all of this is just sitting down with George and saying, George, I've been a little silly Billy. After all the stuff with Max, it makes me realise that ultimately for Mercedes, you are actually the only one we can really depend on. And then George is like, crikey, Toto, I didn't realise you felt this way about me. Okay, let's get to work. This way, you can just say, well, we looked at Max, we ultimately settled with you, George. We believe that you're even better than Verstappen. That is the best way to heal any wounds that have been manifested throughout the entire negotiation process the last few months. Just make George feel self-important. Make him feel like the biggest driver in Formula One right now. Bigger than Piastri, bigger than Verstappen, bigger than Leclerc, bigger than Norris. He's the man! And maybe at the same time give him room to breathe and actually be able to make his own tyre calls and that the team will actually be listening to his every word rather than the computer. That could really strengthen up a senior driver mandate, and it can also maybe boost Kimi Antonelli as well. If Russell is fired up going into next year, Antonelli may be able to do some good justice in building up his own reputation, having a really strong and spirited leader who's happy to bring the rookie/sophomore along with him for the ride. Especially since George has been saying that he sees no problem with Kimi, that the only issue this year so far has been that the car has been going backwards, not Kimi going backwards. Now, I don't know the exact clauses in that contract or the money or term, but I do feel like Toto is going to have to pay through the nose for what he's been up to with Max since April. He might have gotten away with a cheaper deal had he just read the Red Bull room a little better and earlier. Oops. So, why is Marko doing this other than making Toto look silly? Easy! Red Bull's 2026 project needs a calm Max at the helm, especially with Ford knocking around themselves, making this Red Bull partnership very public and a very high stakes one, especially since the company isn't exactly in the best health right now financially. This has to work, and Max has to be there to help make it work. They know that Max may be at best around for the next 3 seasons, so you've got to make the most of it. And what Red Bull really need to do is take back control of the Verstappen story, make sure that no one else can control it for the foreseeable future, and that may mean Max may get exactly what he wants. And if it's not a title-winning car, but a car that is still competitive and can win on a race-by-race basis, that might be okay for Max, and especially if he is allowed the freedom to be able to pursue his dreams of doing more endurance racing. Maybe he might be able to do Le Mans. Maybe he might be able to do other things because, well, Fernando Alonso got that freedom, and I think it's brilliant that Red Bull are actually loosening the tethers even more on Max to be able to take part in these massive endurance events, not just the sim ones. And hey, a week where Red Bull talk about Max as an anchor and Mercedes talk about Russell as their leader, that'll be a good week for Milton Keynes. And it also corrals the driver market away from their own headaches, like I mentioned. Marko also denying the mutterings that apparently all the other seats have been decided already. As far as Helmut is concerned, nothing is sorted out. And Marko is qualified to discuss this as he is the guy in charge of that choice. So if all of the headlines are pointed towards Toto and him really dropping the ball on something that is really simple, that's absolutely fine for Helmut. So the easiest thing to do is just keep on talking about how silly this protraction is going. Well played, Helmut. Well played. And you can make your own play by watching this video I think that you'll really like. I'll be right with you. I've just got to change into something more comfortable.